issue surrounding the accolade of national hero status in certain individuals,
Yes.
not to limit it to George Walter, but to ensure that going forward, when we make someone a national hero, that we would have come to a consensus across the political divide that the person's contribution was an exceptional one. This is not about knighthood, no, this is about national hero status.
Yes.
Someone like Viv Richards, for example, whose performance on the cricket field was exceptional, absolutely deserving. And that is the type of people who we want our youth to emulate. If we lower the bar and we continue to dumb down our people, then clearly we will not be able to rise to new heights.
Agree.
So, whereas some people may have felt that the comment that I made last Saturday was designed to denigrate Sir George, it was not. In fact, it was a fleeting comment, as you're aware, in response to a written statement by D.J. Zalaisak in which he was trying to suggest that Sir Lester, Sir John St. Louis, and Sir Noel Richards, that they were not deserving of the accolades that were bestowed upon them. So I found it quite appropriate to use George as an example of someone in which the UPP itself would have lowered the bar in order to accommodate, this accolade of national hero. Now, it is one thing to lower the bar for someone who is knighted, but when it comes to national hero status, I'm of the view that it should be done on a non-partisan basis and there should be consensus.
I agree. And I'm sure that most right-thinking Antiguans and Barbudans would agree with you with that.
So the process of selecting a national hero has to be reviewed. In the past, like when Sir George was made a national hero, it was the then Prime Minister who had the power to do it. And he did it. Even when Sir Lester was made a national hero, though deserving, we would have subsequently put a committee in place and we got a unanimous agreement from the committee. So that was fine. But you could see where, even with the present system where we have a committee with a majority of the governing party, where it could be manipulated. So I'm of the view that as we ventilate this issue, and we're not ventilating this issue to undermine Sir George, it is to protect that ultimate honor of national hero, to make sure that we do not diminish the value of a national hero. And again, I express an opinion, and this is not inconsistent to what I said before Sir George was actually given the accolade. I was on an Inside program many years ago, and I said that, look, no disrespect, Sir George has made a significant contribution, but I do not believe, and I am still of that view, that his contribution rose to the level of a national hero because of the short period in which he served, one term as Premier, and everybody know that that one term was a failed term.
Yes.
It was one of the most difficult economic periods in the history of the country. And then he had the unfortunate situation in which he was imprisoned. And that imprisonment was as a result of wrongdoing. It's not because he was a freedom fighter on behalf of the people why he went to prison. Is it because he was involved in a corrupt act involving the conversion of a steel frame that belonged to the public, to the government? Now, generally speaking, when you have leaders and individuals of significant status in the society who falter and they end up in prison, what you'll find is that a society normally moves towards extending some form of pardon, or if they would have served time, they find ways and means to shorten the time that they serve. Because the idea is not to totally demolish them. So you'd have seen that in the case of Sir George, even more recently in the case of Sherfield Boyne.
Yes.
So you'll find that after they would have served maybe 2-3 years in prison, that they would appeal, and no one, not even law enforcement, or even the courts for that matter, they have any inclination to challenge them. The whole idea, look, they serve a couple years already, let them go. So you find invariably, they'll let them go on a technicality. But these same people who would have committed the act for which they're incarcerated will come back a decade or two later and say that they're incarcerated because of political victimization, as though we're stupid, as though the act was not committed. And this is precisely what happened in the case of Sir George. No one can escape the fact that he converted a steel frame building that belonged to the government into private ownership. And you see, if we don't deal with these issues openly and to put systems in place to prevent a recurrence, then it will happen time and time again. Look what has happened with the bus cases. No different from what Sir George did. And I felt that based on that indiscretion and the fact too that he only served for a short period of time, even his motive and what propelled him to become the leader in this country was bad. Sir George actually destroyed the Antigua Trades and Labor Union, divided it, because he saw an opportunity to use his popularity as the General Secretary of the time, as the most beloved person in the country. And generally speaking, that has been the history of the General Secretary in the Labour Party. The General Secretary historically has been perhaps easily the most powerful person. And he used that for his own gain. Even when he would have said subsequently that he didn't want to be in a leader and so on. Totally untrue. Sir George was actually telling people prior to making the move to divide the Labour Party, he was going to be the next leader, the next premier. And even when he was successful in splitting the Antigua Trades and Labor Union to form the AWU, he was so clever. He told Sevier at the time, because anything he wanted at the time Sevier would have done, he told Sevier not to resign, because he himself did not have a political institution of which he was the head to take over the leadership of the country. So he conveniently left Sevier in office, which caused some fallout even within the AW, because people like Tim Hector and Reuben Harris and so on got offended. Their position was, we have fought with you so hard to move Sevier, and you're leaving him there because you want to buy time to become premier. So that's precisely what he did. So Robert Hall, for example, who was positioned at the time politically to become the leader of the country, was subsequently displaced by Sir George, who ostensibly had no interest in leadership.
The term used back then was he hijacked.
That's precisely what he did.
I'm listening to you and I'm asking myself, you ever spoke to my father? No. I mean, you're saying the exact same thing that I saw that my father. George Walter said, if you elect me to lead the Antigua Workers Union, I will die with you union-wise. And my father said, I have no respect for that man after that, because months after, he hijacked Hall.
So
Prime Minister, keep in mind that you have a Zoom meeting.
Yes,
in a matter of minutes, because I also wanted, since we're on the issue of Sir George and court and so on, I wanted to ask you about that defamation case, the appeal that you won against Isaac Newton.
Fine. So we'll deal with Sir George tomorrow, but I want our people to understand the context in which we will deal with that.
Yes.
The context is to make sure that we look at the position of national hero objectively, and that we reward outstanding people, outstanding performance, not ordinary performance. Because if you reward ordinary performance or mediocre performance with national hero status, then a man like Baldwin Spencer could come subsequently and say, hey, George served for 1 term, and y'all make him national hero. I served for 2. And I served for a longer period in the trade union movement than Sir George, so I should be a national hero too.
Yeah.
Or his supporters may promote that kind of argument.
Hence the reason for consensus.
So we must ventilate this issue. And again, I want to say to the George Walter family, this is not an attack on the Walter family. This is not an attack on the dead. This is about ventilating an issue that was never, ever ventilated, because the way the system was structured, the then Prime Minister had the right, the power, to make him a national hero. So without any discussions, without any consultations, Sir George was made a national hero.
And
anyway.